Hello, everyone. This is Fantastic Worlds. Welcome you back to Lovecraft Country and the last episode of Control, Lore, and Chill. Now, this is going to be the last of this series, but it's also going to be the segue into a much larger potential series, which is the Remedyverse itself. That is the Alan Wake games, the currently Alan Wake and Alan Wake's American Nightmare, and the future game Alan Wake 2, which of course is on the short list for this channel when it does come out, assuming the world is still here next spring. And of course, to a certain degree, the first two Max Payne series produced by Remedy, the third one was not, and Quantum Break. Now, first of all, let's begin with the fact this is going to have spoilers for Alan Wake. If you want to see Alan Wake unspoiled, I've got a series, my first series up there on this channel for Lovecraft Country. I'll put a link up there to the right. Yell at me if I forget about it in the comments, but you'll find it in my playlist as well. And that went over, well, some of what I'll be going over now. Now, we've learned a lot since then with both Control and other supplemental material that's been released by Remedy. I'll be going over some of that here, but like I said, this is right for me expanding into a wider series. But specifically for this game, we're going to be discussing, hang on for a second, we're going to be discussing the similarities and connections between the two. Now, in case you don't know, this is a crude simulation of Hartman's Lodge, the Cauldron Lake Lodge, where he kept several creatives prisoner in an attempt to access the Dark Presence's ability to alter reality. Again, this is Alan Wake, so we'll be going over it. Now, the thing is that Hartman himself could not create, because he's a rather barren soul. He got originally the character of Tom. You'll remember him briefly being referred to, or sort of referred to, in the first section of the Alan Wake experience here. And that went bad, like horribly bad. In fact, great. The whole putting everything that Hartman did wrong with Tom constitutes the whole reason why the first Alan Wake games exists. But in the meantime, he kept trying to do so until they found Alan, screwed with Alan, but Alan already had his issues, and boom, everything kind of erupted. Now, let's go over the status quo of what is going on at the end of Alan Wake, and of course, during Alan Wake's American Nightmare. In Alan Wake, Alan submerges himself into the dark place to release his wife because he uses what's called equivalency exchange. It's a concept in occultism where it essentially boils down to sacrifice. To get something, you have to sacrifice something of equal importance. Alan is an egotist. I mean, he's not a paragon. You play him a lot during the game and you get used to his problems like alcoholism, self-centeredness, but he's basically a good person. But the most important thing to him, of course, is him. By sacrificing him, he released his captive wife, Alice Wake, who's briefly referred to in the lore here. One of the things you'll note is that the whole thing, starting with Alan Wake's nemesis Hartman here getting out, was that Alice Wake visited the Control Bureau. Yeah, Alice Wake actually knows what's going on. The Bureau allows her to run around. And only one reason for that is that Alan is protecting her with his reality alteration abilities. Now, the thing about Cauldron Lake, the reason why it's the epicenter for so much, wrong button, is that it is a vast area of power that a creative person can use to subtly alter reality. Now, a lot of times in the game, people go over, like this is, for example, is the Lodge. These are the assets in the game itself with Hartman's Lodge. Did a lot of shooting there. And the irony is there's a bit of a Easter egg here, as there are these cans that you can shoot along the game and get an achievement for. Let's see. Yeah, you can do it here, but I was hoping for an achievement. Oh well, it'll restack at some point. Also, probably used the wrong gun for that. Forgot I had the laser up. Anyways, but yeah, here's Bright Falls itself from an asset rendering. I remember this. That's the police station there, where that's pointing right now. That's the docks. The diner should be down here. Gods, I remember this place. Spent so much time, like after my first series, just kind of going through it, trying to experience everything, because there's a lot of stuff you have to wait around for. If there's one complaint I have about doing it for a playthrough, is that my attempts to get all the characters to speak everything meant that I spent several minutes hanging around the same spot. But yeah, there's the Oh Dear Diner, there's the street itself, there's the police station. Kind of wish I could read all these, but I don't think you're meant to. And yeah, this is, like I said, the town itself. This is like another street, docking system, and the lake. Now, sorry, the river. The lake itself is separate, Cauldron Lake. Now, Cauldron Lake is an epicenter of dark force. Now, I've spoken about the aspects of divinity a lot and briefly touched on the void. Now, the void is the dark potential within creation itself. It's the raw material that the gods themselves have shaped to make creation itself. And inevitably, all must fall back into the void. Now, what has happened in this series is that we've worked with Ahti, who is basically an aspect of the divine that is trying to put things into order. But that's not the first aspect that we found. You see, there is an entity associated with Cauldron Lake that attempts to twist anybody who uses its reality alteration powers in order to... Oh, you gotta be... Oh, that's to summon an agent. In order to be able... Network disconnected, of course it is. In order to be able to twist it to their ends. And their ends are, as we discovered in Alan Wake, to destroy the world. Oh, damn it. I'll be back in a moment. Well, as you can see, that was a lot of fun. Yeah, forgot I get ambushed occasionally. But yes, let's get back to where we were. Anyway, so Cauldron Lake has the ability to alter reality slightly. This is because the Dark Presence, the Dark Place, as Alan calls it, is the void itself. Essentially, it's a thin place between where the physical world and the void itself can do so. Now, as I've stated before, just because it's God doesn't mean it's nice. Is that the Dark Presence is also an aspect of the divine. Now, I've also noticed I've lost a couple of things here, so let's get this knocked out. Bright Falls, 1976. Now, this is referring to Tom's. There we go, collectibles. Tom's time. All right. On the day of the flooding, the rock band Old Gods of Asgard was rehearsing in a field outside the Anderson farm, the homestead of the band members Odin and Tor Anderson. Now, they fit into the story, too. We'll get to them in a moment. Both admitted to being in a heavy state of inebriation next time, having spent days drinking their home-brewed moonshine while celebrating Deerfest. After the townspeople evacuated from the flooded field, Sheriff Breaker was asked by Freya Anderson, Freya being yet another, the daughter of Tor Anderson, check on her father and uncle. Breaker, remember, is a member of the... Foundation. God, I still have the SCP Foundation on my head. The Control Bureau. And found the members alive and in need of medical aid. Tor Anderson had been struck by lightning, Tor after all, and Odin had cut out his own eye, possibly a reference to Norse deities Thor and Odin, and he claimed they had fought valiantly defending a dark army, the Scratching Hag, rising from Cauldron Lake. See AWE 1970 related to the AWE event at Divers Isle. Impossible to verify. These events are relevant to the concurring AWE at Bright Falls and the Cauldron Lake threshold. Odin and Tor Anderson listen as person of interest. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, the story even gets wider than that. Any creative, including the band known as the Children of the Elder Gods, which of course is Tor Anderson, and we've already been that one. Tor Anderson and his brother, it turns out that they were tempted, like Alan and Tom were, into using the lake to alter reality, but the Dark Presence, speaking of, attempted to short-circuit that. And we can photograph it. You know, we had one of those. Attempted to short-circuit that in order... All right, if you remember, Alice, by the way, took a picture of Mr. Scratch, the evil doppelganger of Alan, in their house as it manifested and attempted to attack her. But remember, using a flashbulb against the Taken would have driven him off because they hate light. Oh my god, all of this data is just coming in. Okay, so what is the Dark Presence? That's kind of the important thing here. We're going to get through this, and then we'll move into Wake evidence. We want to catch up. All right, a photograph of Alan Wake captured by Alice Wake during an event at her home. Alice Wake, former wife of Alan Wake, at UE35 for details, was recently visited by her ex-husband or entity resembling him. See file Mr. Scratch for more. Being a professional photographer, Mrs. Wake positioned cameras with motion sensors around the corridor he appears in and managed to capture an image of Mr. Wake on film. During an interview with Mrs. Wake, she mentioned her favorite camera. A blank model was lost in 2010 during AWE 38. No match has been found, but conflicting evidence from AWE 35. It may be filed as a potential alter item, and research staff stationed at Bright Falls are being contacted to check if they have any knowledge of such an item. That sounds like a little foreshadowing. But what is the Dark Presence? Why is it screwing with people and in an attempt to destroy the world? Which is essentially what it did with Tom, what it did with the Anderson brothers, and what it did with Alan. The Dark Presence is the opposite of a T. The Dark Presence is the dark half of the divinity, the destroyer. You see, a T is of the opinion that this whole problem we've been going over, the Watchers sectioning off a piece of the universe to try to rule over themselves, creating the house as the demiurge to surround it and weaken it so they can alter reality to their benefit and keep the people inside of it ignorant of their own potential divinity. He thinks it can be solved long, involved process of placing Jesse in charge of the Bureau, who will then shift the Bureau to Polaris, and then thus Ahti's goals, and eventually dismantle the house and slowly bring in the reality that we are bubbled away from in our reality. But the Dark Presence, which is also an aspect of the divine, who has been taken many forms, including Barbara Jagger, is the primary antagonist in Alan Wake. Briefly, Agent Nightwood, but I think since he was fictional, created by Alan, did not work as a vessel. But the true Dark Presence that we've been dealing with is Mr. Scratch. You see, I believe Alan was chosen by the Dark Presence to destroy the world in the same way that Ahti chose Jesse as an advocate to preserve the world. In fact, the future may not be Jesse and Alan working together. It may be like with Tom and Barbara of the original Alan Wake series as opponents, because the Dark Presence desires to destroy the world as the easiest solution to dealing with the whole Watcher problem, the whole Gnosticism problem, the whole cutting off the world. If she just rips it apart, tears it into pieces, and then all of it dissolves back into the void, you know what? Problem solved. It's done. You know, the sneaking around and all these decades of planning to get Jesse into the director's chair. You just burn everything. Yeah, you kill everyone, but as they point out, they'll just be reborn again in some other world. Why are we wasting all this time? Why is Ahti doing it? Ahti is doing it because the preserver, as he currently is, wants to take as much as what's here and preserve it into the net future where see the best parts of it. Why tear apart everything when you can just make it a part of a better world in the future? But of course, the dark side says, screw it. It's all gone. There's nothing worth saving. Let's burn it down. Now, this whole combination between nihilism and preservation, kind of relevant in these days, but this is the crux between between Control and Alan Wake. Now, the other things to consider about is that Quantum Break and Alan Wake have a familiar theme in that both cases the world is breaking down. Now, we've gone over how the world is breaking down because of the Gnosticism angle here. Hang on, let's just get back up here. There we go. Gnosticism, kind of like it this way. Right, that's just the summoning thing. Right, Gnosticism is the opinion the world will slowly break down because they're breaking off, they're sealing us away from the energy of divine that preserves things. It's why you have alter-world events. It's why you have altered objects. It's why you have these reality malfunctions, these cancers and necrosis of reality that we're currently fighting as part of the Bureau, but not doing it very well, following a failing holding action that the Hiss invasion has just been the highest peak of at this point. It is inevitable that unless Ahti finds a way to dismantle the oldest house safely and bring this world back up into the greater part of the universe, creation, whatever is out there, that we will inevitably break down and everyone in it will be destroyed. Now, what's interesting is if you are an SCP Foundation fan, you need to check up the pattern screamers, and specifically the one called Reckoner. I don't know SCP number off the top of my head, but look up SCP Reckoner. Look up SCP Reckoner Volgan on YouTube, and you'll get an audio version of it, which is excellent. Which kind of says what happens if it all goes wrong. Reality itself and everyone in it, including us, will break down and cease to exist. And the SCP file there is an example of how that plays out in the fictional SCP universe, which of course is what Control universe has been based off. The Bureau of Control essentially being the SCP, Secure, Contain, Protect, the foundation of this universe. Otherwise, they have an infinite number of universes with an infinite number of versions of the foundation. This is this one's. And yeah, so essentially that is the dynamic battle between the two, between the Dark Presence and their desire to destroy things, which Hartman has been the kind of shitty avatar of, but more importantly, of Alan himself, because Alan isn't meant to be the good person. Oh, for God's sakes. As I was saying before we were so rudely interrupted. Yeah, so the thing is that we now have two dynamic forces attempting to either destroy or preserve this world in relation to the whole Gnosticism Watchers / Demiurge crisis. And the two main ways of doing so is either through Jesse or through Alan's doppelganger, Mr. Scratch. Now, the thing is, if you've been playing Alan Wake Remedyverse for a while, you're going to realize that Alan's doppelganger has been an enemy 3 times in a row. The first one was Dark Alan in the Alan Wake DLC for the original game. Second is Mr. Scratch, which premiered in the Alan Wake main game and then became the main villain of Alan Wake's American Nightmare, who was supposedly destroyed at the end of the American Nightmare series. But here he is again in the Alan Wake DLC for Control. So why? Very simple. Now, I'll put a link to this, hopefully, in the description if I remember, but there is a blog series, a fake one, a ARG, as you were, called House of Dreams. And when the House of Dreams is about somebody who starts dreaming about the events around the Remedyverse, essentially it was the first indication of the Control Bureau because she dreamed of a federal agent coming and stealing the artifacts that she found surrounding Cauldron Lake within her house. Now, these artifacts obviously were created by Alan using his reality alteration abilities. Now, one of the things you have to remember about Alan is that he doesn't really create as much as he shapes reality because he uses pre-existing people, objects, and things to rewrite around his narrative. And in fact, if he doesn't do it properly, if he doesn't portray the people as accurate to their things, to their actions and their nature, then it will fail and the Dark Presence will do so, which is why he's been saying 10 years constantly rewriting the narrative in a desperate attempt to find a way out of the dark place to prevent the dark and to get back to his wife, but it's not going to be possible. The reason is in the House of Dreams, which is the only place you're going to find this. One of the entries has her dreaming about what happened to Barbara and Tom. Now, Barbara and Tom were, of course, the people in the 1970 who Barbara died, she drowned. Tom, by young Philip Hartman there, nudged him into try to write it so she came back to life. But the problem is, resurrection, except for certain religious exceptions, is not a thing that can happen within a normal narrative of the world. If Tom had wrote Barbara had suffered a cold snap and gone into cryogenesis while in the cold water, which is the thing that actually happens, which can keep a person alive for several hours, and that she came to, or that she was secretly pulled up amnesiac at the base of the lake, I'm not doing that one, by somebody and wandered away for several days before coming back to the cabin, that would fit into the narrative. That would have slid right back in, putting Barbara back into the narrative. But he didn't. He didn't preface that. He didn't think about it. He just said, oh, Barbara comes back and she's alive, except she came alive with the Dark Presence because of the break-in narrative made her into its avatar. And basically, Tom got out her heart, which didn't kill her, because it wasn't Barbara, it was an avatar of the darkness. Instead, grappled with her, and they both dove into the lake, him in the diving suit, which is why you constantly see him in a diving suit in Alan Wake, and her essentially becoming the avatar. Now, the thing is, what happens beyond that point is that most people believe, okay, they ascend, Tom becomes the avatar of the light, Barbara becomes the avatar of the dark, and they duel it out. That's not what happened. According to the House of Dreams blog, they both died, and the light and the dark took their presence. In other words, there is no Tom. The Tom you say is just a puppet. The body, the concept of Tom, being puppeted by the light, while Barbara's form is the doing at the dark. So what's going on with Alan and Scratch? Why is we constantly getting Alan's doppelganger? Because and we noticed Alan's doppelganger, during the brief scene we saw him here, through the door, seemed very stable, while Alan himself seems to be falling apart. It's very simple. Mr. Scratch, Alan is supposed to die, and Scratch is supposed to replace him as the avatar of the darkness, instead of Barbara Jagger, and then use Alan's ability in order to be able to destroy the world, cancel it all out, reset, start over without the Watchers. But he's resisting that. Now, the thing is, logically, his wife Alice should have been the opposite, because she was touched by the dark place, and then she's becoming part of the avatar of the light, But it didn't happen, because Alan broke it when the chain, when she had her come out. And because he sacrificed himself to do so, that fit the narrative of sacrifice, which is a occult narrative, which means that it worked. It didn't actually create a malfunction like Tom did with Barbara. Though she's saved, he's still in the dark place, and that sort of unstable balance has been going on for 10 years now, slowly degrading Alan away. Now, what happened is Barry Allen and attempt to get the old guards of Asgard together probably might have been some sort of reflexive need by Alan at some point to be able to try to draw him out as one of his many ways. He thought he could, hey, these guys could sing me out of the dark place, except it didn't work because those guys are, like 80, and the effort was killing them. So he canceled that. Remember, we saw him type it out during the bonus scene that we managed to get during Sidetreks episode, the last one. And yeah, so he's canceled that. We won't bring his wife to protect him. He At Hartman, however, Hartman fell into the dark place, became manipulable to both the darkness and Alan, because Alan's still part of the darkness right now. He's trying to control it, trying to fight the god, essentially, the bad side of God, as it were, from destroying the world by inserting his own narrative. So he created Hartman to come to the Bureau, which already existed by this point, by the way, since Sheriff Breaker, the older one, predates Alan. So he did that. The Bureau set it up so Jesse would become the avatar of the light. Now, we may be setting it, he thinks, we've been thinking that Jesse means to save Alan from the dark place. That's Alan's master plan. Alan probably has a bigger thing going. Does Alan want Jesse to kill him? To just kill him, remove all avatar potential from the dark place for a while at least, to get him out of his misery? Or is he succumbing to the darkness and choosing an opposite avatar to fight it out with, and making sure that avatar was far stronger than Tom was, because Tom was very weak in the first game. He represented the light within the middle of the darkness, which really isn't that great. But if he creates Jesse as this massive, powerful entity who's, when Polaris, who's essentially an angel to his sister, it's entirely possible that he thinks that Jesse can take the darkness itself and destroy it. We've been attacking eldritch abominations, but we're going to be literally attacking a face of God at this point, and that's not impossible to kill. I mean, some legends say otherwise, but the question is what happens then? Can Jesse do it? Is Jesse even going to show up in Alan Wake 2, which is billed as survival horror? Or are we saving that for Control 2? What exactly is going through Sam's Lake mind, and will civilization hold together long enough for us to find out? I have no idea. He writes very slowly. We'll find out the next part in the spring, and I will actually have to go to the Epic store and buy that one. Gag me with a, whatever. I'm not fond of the Epic store. They have done some shady stuff to this point, and Alan Wake 2 is the only reason I would ever even make an account there. But that's the future. This is the present. Here we are in the ruins of a Hartman simulation, Hartman's Lodge simulation, and we are going to have to wait and see. Now, like I said, I'm thinking if there's enough interest in this, I'll make a straight-up episode about how the line passes through. Like, for example, Quantum Break also has a reality breaking down, which would kind of correspond to the breaking down of reality from a Gnostic point of view, due to the fact that we're cut off from the rest of the universe. I haven't actually done the full game. If there's interest, I'll do it. It's not super great hybrid television series / game, but it's doable, and it's got some interesting choice-based scenarios. And Max Payne I'm not doing, by the way, because the little things that show up in the side content for Max Payne are incredibly hard to get, and I'd be probably off as summarizing them than actually going through that game. But yeah, if there's an interest, I'll track it down, the parallels between the breakdown of the universe in Quantum Break, Alan Wake itself, which is a fictional world in that universe, and of course Control and the larger concept of the SCP Foundation's roots within this world. But until then, this is Fantastic World, saying farewell from Lovecraft Country. It's a bit of a short episode, but like I said, unless I'm really going to get into depth of the Remedyverse, it's kind of hard to go any further in this, because we'd have to really get to the roots. But if you like this, like, share, subscribe. If you're interested in a larger view of how all this fits in with Gnosticism, occultism, and the Hermetic end of the world compared to the Kabbalistic end of the world within these games, because that's essentially what Quantum Break and the Control ones are both parallels of, the opposing views of how the world will end. Let me know in the comments below. And of course, if you really like this, down below links to the Gummer Playment, become a subscriber, and lore episodes vote. One of the things that subscribers do vote on. We're going to be expanding a bit in Cultist Simulator first, but we'll tackle Remedy again, especially if Alan 2 manages to keep up its schedule of release in the spring. In any case, I will see you next time. I'd like to thank my Acolyte level supporters, whose contributions help this channel grow and hastens the inevitable digital apocalypse and rise of the Dark Lords of Content and Data.